Hi, I am Jan Reardon, and I am a board member of the Jennifer Reardon Foundation. And I have the pleasure of being here once a month talking with different people throughout the community that represent the pillars of Jen's foundation. The four pillars of the foundation are financial literacy, early childhood education, women's empowerment, and community vitality. And speaking of community vitality, I'm thinking on my way over here, and I'll introduce you to my guest, but when I'm thinking community vitality, this show will be truly about the vital part of vitality. I mean, it's at its finest. So I have with us here today Sarah Lemna, who is the executive director of the Vermont chapter of the American Red Cross, and located, thankfully, right here in Burlington, Vermont. And I just feel so honored to be able to turn this over to Sarah so we can find out. Many of us know a lot of what the American Red Cross does, but it's just so comprehensive as far as, touching into so many different walks of life and people that do rely on the American Red Cross. So let me just begin by introducing you to Sarah Lemna, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
I know, talk about, getting into the position and hitting the ground running, I'm sure, every day for you, because you said you've been with American Red Cross for 9 months.
Yes.
And I know many other community positions and boards too. So I really am very thankful for you making the time to be here. I know what your schedule is like, Sarah. So,
honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I have, it seems like a million different questions and different topics that I just want to make sure that we do include. But let's just start, if we could, with the mission of the American Red Cross and, in fact, how that folds into the Vermont chapter. And is it different in the sense of our community? Are you able to have control and tweak things, or is it really right across the board? So let's start with that.
Well, the mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering during emergencies by utilizing our volunteers and our generous donations. And so the Vermont chapter is part of the Northern New England region, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. But we do work with our partners across the country. So, for example, last year during the historic floods, we had volunteers coming in from all over the country to help Vermonters.
Right here in Montpelier area.
Right here in Montpelier.
Beautiful.
And right now, with the unfortunate weather going on in Texas and New Mexico, we have Vermonters heading out to support, efforts out there to make sure people are safe, they have a place to sleep, they have food, they're protected, they have case management. So we do work together and support each other. But Vermont has its own unique flavor.
And even better, right?
Yeah, we have our own Vermont staff and our own Vermont volunteers, and we do what's best to maximize to make sure the community gets the services they need.
Love it. And speaking of volunteers, obviously, you had mentioned that there's 90% of your workforce is volunteers. So, number one, here's a shout out. If people are looking to volunteer, let us know how to do that. But what type of volunteer roles are you typically looking for?
Everything under the sun. So the great thing about the Red Cross is if you want to do something in person, we have opportunities. You want to do something remote, we have opportunities.
Oh, fabulous.
Which is great, because not everybody has transportation or the ability.
Right, but they have the desire.
Yeah, so some people are checking in people at a blood donation site. Some people are on our disaster action team, which means if there's a fire, and I've been through a fire, I know how traumatic that is, they're heading out in the middle of the night to make sure that family has a place to stay, that they have comfort items, and that we start that process to get them support and case management. We have people installing smoke alarms. We have people who are, servicing our military, both active and retired, making sure we get communications abroad when there's a family emergency, or making sure they have access to services here when they're struggling. Military life is challenging, and making sure those families are supported. And we're also working with people who live in this country who aren't American citizens, that have family members who live abroad, who maybe there's a earthquake.
Exactly.
And we're connecting to make sure their family's okay.
Talk about a lifeline.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That's beautiful.
So we do whatever needs to help support the community, to make sure they get the support they needed during an emergency, to make sure, that initial, do you need a place to sleep? Do you need food? Do you need access to financial support? So really being the boots on the ground to making sure that no one's left behind.
Right, which I love, because when I first thought of the American Red Cross in being able to have somebody represent your organization here on the show, I was thinking more along the lines of, blood donations, and I'd like to talk about that, but you've obviously already touched upon the fact that, we're talking disasters, and, being able to head up and, as you said, head out to New Mexico. So is that all volunteer-based as well?
That is volunteer-based.
That is just beautiful. That's remarkable.
It is amazing, and people will head out for weeks at a time,
right?
Some for a month at a time. We have people still in Hawaii from the Maui wildfires. And so it's amazing. I am constantly humbled and impressed by
I
these
bet how
volunteers.
inspirational is that, right?
That pack up and head out to
right.
help people in need.
And for you, I mean, talk about rewarding. It has to feel great. I mean, I'm sure at the end of the day, you have so much to reflect back on that happens, you know, that is just so meaningful.
It is, and we didn't even touch about training services. So we are the #1 training location if you want to have a lifeguard learn how to do CPR
Right, I wanted
or
to
water
ask you
safety.
about that. Right, so CPR, water safety, and those are classes that you can take through the American Red Cross that are outsourced, right? Like you'd be at a
Exactly.
location, say for instance, you know, at the YMCA. And so you'll do a water safety instructor course. People can graduate from that and be a lifeguard, as
Exactly.
well as take the swim lessons themselves just to be safe in the water.
Exactly.
And, you know, as you touched upon the fact, when I was with the Y, actually, we had a lot of new Americans that had just come over at that time. And water safety was such a concern because people were drowning so often. And we really kicked in, you know, shout out to Jess Lucas over at the Greater Burlington Y, because she just did amazing things to offer those classes on a regular basis. And water safety was just so ingrained in the community. And thankfully, things have been going very, very well in that regard.
Definitely, but you know, I think we take assumptions that people know how to swim, or that
Adults, you think adults know how to swim?
or even people who are swimmers, they get they get
elements.
complacent.
That's right.
You know,
Right.
they swim by themselves. They swim when they're tired. They go out too far. They go out in
And the
rough
elements
weather.
shift, you know,
Yes.
in a heartbeat, and then next thing you know, there you are with this force, and we know how powerful water is just when you talk about that flooding.
Exactly.
that
By the
took
time you
place.
know you're in trouble,
Oh,
it
it
is
could
very
be too
short
late.
window.
Right. That's right. It is a short window. So let's see. As far as, you know, with blood drives, how, let's kind of give a shout out to, is it the website where somebody could go and find out where, okay, so what is the website?
You can go to redcross.org
Okay.
and find the local. There's a
So
thousand.
Vermont is there?
There's 1,000 blood drives in Vermont every year.
That is
In
remarkable.
every little town, in every
Right,
county.
right.
So yes, the list is available online, and it's easy to sign up online. You can get your appointment set. You can pre-screen to make sure that you're eligible. Most people are, but it
Right.
will look at your medications, your health care.
and which is great to know before you get
Exactly.
there. I mean, you want to do it, but sometimes you just can't.
Exactly. So it's amazing when I drive around the state. I'm always running across a van setting up for a blood drive.
Amazing.
We have an
1,000.
amazing team. 1,000
Right.
here. Over 31,000 units of blood are collected here in Vermont each year. That is
And
a
there's
lot.
still a shortage.
And there's still a shortage.
Are there certain blood types that are short that,
It varies.
right, depending on,
Depending on, but you know, the problem is that blood has a short shelf life.
right.
So it's not like we can, you know,
Say right now,
have bulk.
compile all this,
Exactly.
right, yeah.
You know, it has to be used within a month. So, and then we talk about platelets for cancer treatment. That has
Same
a
shelf life?
Has a week.
Oh boy, I didn't realize that.
So it's really
so
quick
constant.
turnaround.
Constant.
So you have to keep collecting because, you know, if there's bad weather, if there's a flu epidemic and people stay home, if there's something going on, people don't donate blood.
Right.
You know, and it's a constant need. So it's just amazing to think that the life-saving measures that just donating blood can do.
Oh, exactly. And how often can somebody give blood, but then secondly, how often can you give platelets?
So you can give blood every 56 days. Platelets you can do more often. It's a few weeks.
Oh, okay.
But you have to, you know, I would talk to your medical doctor too. if
Okay,
you're gonna
it's
do
more
ongoing.
about individualized then,
Exactly.
in some ways.
But yeah, so we have repeat donors.
I know. I have my best friend's husband is, you know, clockwork.
And platelets
for
are amazing
years,
because some of
right.
them are there for like 3 hours at a time.
That's what I heard.
But they're dedicated. And sometimes people started because they had a loved one that needed treatment.
Exactly.
And then they want to help. So they
Sure.
go in, and it's always needed. We also are struggling with our sickle cell initiative because people who have sickle cell anemia need hundreds of gallons of
For
donations
transfusions.
throughout their lifetime. So to have that many transfusions, you need to have a match so close. Because if not, your body starts
Rejecting
it.
Sure.
Yeah. So we are constantly trying to encourage all people to consider donating, and you know, we're seeing a 20% year decrease in donations right now. So right now we have way less donors than we've ever had in the history of the.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about the pandemic in relation to that. Did things sort of start to dwindle down as a result of that, would you say, or is it unrelated?
It is part of it. So we used to go to all these businesses and have all these blood
Right,
drives.
of course.
Businesses shut down.
Right.
So during COVID, we couldn't go. The businesses opened back up. Some of them are still reluctant to have people come in. even the ones that don't mind if we come in, maybe half of their employees are hybrid and they're working from home a few days a week.
Exactly. I mean, talk about changing overnight.
Yeah. So now you have to encourage people to come to us.
Right.
That's what's more challenging than going to them.
Sure.
We are seeing a return. People are coming back.
Wonderful.
We're working a lot with schools and getting young people excited about donating.
Fantastic.
In colleges, but it's a shifting culture.
Definitely.
And we have to adjust like everyone else.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's true, but talk about such a critical need. So it's not as though you can really sit back and wait and see what happens. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about the American Red Cross. Talk about proactive.
Yeah, and our account managers are out there every day hitting the pavement, finding locations,
Right.
working with businesses, working with community centers, advertising, getting people signed up, because it's a critical need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you said that the work with the armed forces. What is the program like that you have in place with the armed forces?
So it's our original program. I mean, that's how the Red Cross was founded. It was founded by Claire Barton on the Civil War battlefield. She saw a need. She saw soldiers who were suffering. She was a nurse. She also saw a need to connect those injured soldiers to their loved ones and started
Talk about a legacy.
I know.
Oh, my
and here we
goodness.
are still going.
Yes.
And so, I remember my uncle passed away and my cousin was deployed in Afghanistan, and it was the Red Cross that got the message to him that he needed to come home.
I
mean,
see.
those are kind of the things we're doing. Yeah,
Right.
we're still doing the communication.
And as you said, when there's a disaster elsewhere, to be able to talk with people here and get them connected to their loved ones in another country.
And prepare for deployment. We have classes to, somebody's being deployed, to get the family and the soldier prepared while they're away. If the family needs support, if they need, a program to kind of understand what it's like to be in the military. When they come back, a lot of soldiers are struggling with
Sure.
post-military deployment. So we have different programs to help with reentry. And then we have our
It's
Heroes.
wonderful. It's so much more extensive than I realized.
And then we have our Heroes Network, because a lot of our veterans return and they're struggling financially. They're struggling to access services. And our case manager is going to actually help them access services to get them the help they need to take care of them and their families.
So it's called the Heroes Program?
Heroes Network, yes.
Heroes Network. So what would be an example, for instance, somebody has, been overseas and in the war, they come back and they reach out to the American Red Cross, and then what type of services would be provided if they were struggling, whether it be, emotionally, physically, financially? What types of things are implemented?
So our caseworkers can help people get financial support. They can help them access the VA and work with the VA to make their case a higher priority, because the VA is so vast.
Oh, exactly.
And our caseworkers know how to work through that process. They can help them with wellness programs to help
What a
with
gift.
PTSD.
Oh, right.
And we're working with the VAs all the time to support the VAs. We just started a pet therapy program where we
I
have pet
love
therapy going to
it.
the VA, because soldiers are there for a long time.
So tell us a little bit more about this program. This sounds wonderful.
I want to go down there.
I was just going to say,
I
let me
haven't
know when you
seen
do.
our dog yet.
Oh, my goodness.
So just get certified. It's just starting to do visits at the VA. But study after study shows that it is
there's no
so
question.
important to have that happy little face come in and just be there and quiet.
Exactly.
You don't have to explain how you feel or what you want. You can just pat the dog and be still. And it lowers blood pressure, it lowers anxiety, and it helps people get better.
Function.
Yes.
Right. It's so powerful. I mean, as we know, we talked about it earlier, dogs are such a special part of this world for us, and their souls were so, grateful just to have them in our lives. I mean, it's life altering.
It is.
When you have that relationship, so to fold that in, at such a crucial time in somebody's life, talk about life altering, right? That's just beautiful.
Yeah, we're really proud of it.
Oh, I bet. That's remarkable. So let's see what else we have. As far as the fire prevention campaign, that was something else that we touched upon. So if you could elaborate on that a little bit more, please.
Yeah, so we have about 130 home fires that we support here in Vermont every year. It's about 300 individuals. And I personally have gone through a home fire.
That's what you had said, right?
That was my first touch with the Red Cross, actually. I was 13.
Oh.
Me and my sister just got home from school. We were starting our homework, and our neighbor threw a tea kettle that was on fire down the stairwell in between our duplex. And it was an old farmhouse. It went up fast.
Oh, how frightening is that?
I had time to grab the family photo albums, because my mom said, the photo albums.
It was drilled into your head, right?
My sister grabbed the dog.
Oh.
And that's all we had time for.
Right.
And it was gone. And I remember it was the first time I saw my dad cry. And the next day there was a knock on the door at my grandmother's apartment, and it was 2 Red Cross volunteers. I don't know how they knew where we were. They
How
had a bag
beautiful.
of,
That just gives you chills,
they had a
right?
bag of goodies. They had like gift cards to Ames department store. I'm dating myself.
Right.
So I could get clothes and a backpack to go to school the next day. And it was like the first day of normal. And that's what our volunteers do. They're heroes. They make someone in the worst time of their life.
Right. Have as smooth a transition as you could
transition.
even, begin to imagine.
And that's not even talking about, we have programs for mental health and for spiritual health. Because when you're going through a disaster, it's so easy to become frozen in that space.
Well, that's the thing I was thinking when you talked before about with the, VA and then all the different services and having people help you. Otherwise, you get paralyzed.
You get paralyzed.
It's talk about overwhelming.
It is.
But it's your entire world has crashed down on you. And here you have a smiling face and team that can just change everything for you in a matter of time. And just to know that they're moving in that direction, what a gift psychologically.
And our team is so emotionally empathetic. They're right there. If you need to just sit and have someone hold your hand and be quiet, they'll do that. If you want someone to talk or listen, they'll do that.
And again, those are volunteers.
Those are volunteers, and they are an amazing team. And they come in and they meet you where you're at to help you take that next step.
Beautiful.
And to see that there is a new day coming.
Right.
Because it's emotionally taxing. People are. The illusion of control, the illusion of safety has been ripped from them.
Oh, exactly. Talk about vulnerable.
All their memories.
Yes.
Like the photo albums.
Yes.
I was blessed to save those, but if I would have lost them, that would have been devastating for my family.
Sure, and that's usually what happens. So, thankfully you have your dog and your family and your photo albums,
I know. And, like in Montpelier last year, there were so many families that lost everything.
Everything.
They're still not back in their homes.
No, because then even like the businesses in that Montpelier area, they just opened and then another flood comes through. I mean, talk about, mentally what that can do to a community.
It's devastating. And we were blessed that we were able to give additional financial support in February to those families.
Right.
But it's still a drop in the bucket. They're still doing renovations. It's hard to find contractors because everybody needs them. And these families are still in flux, living in temporary housing, and it's almost a year. We're coming up on the anniversary.
Right.
So it's just water is so devastating. It has so much force, and people don't realize that
until you're standing and seeing what it can do in a very, very short period of time. I mean, when you see things on TV, it's real. You think, oh, maybe this is like a dramatization, but boy, I tell you, it is so forceful. People, thankfully, not many people will experience that, but when you do, as you say, it changes your world.
It does. It's devastating. And a lot of families now have multiple generations living in the home.
Right.
So we help people who had grandparents and parents
Good
and
point.
children. So now you get this whole dimensional family trying to figure out what to do.
Right, and they're all at different stages, all doing different things between school and work and retirement, and everybody's going in different directions, and then, where do you start?
I mean, just last year during the flood, we had 30,000 meals that were provided. It was almost 1,000 night stays in a shelter. It's just a mammoth operation logistically.
So with the meals, like a team would come in, and where do you go to?
Sometimes we buy them from local restaurants.
Very nice.
Sometimes we work with community partners. It's whatever we need to do to get the food to them the quickest. We want them to have a hot meal. We want them to have something that's not just a grab-and-go thing whenever possible.
Right.
And we just try to support them to get through it because it's so traumatic. I mean, I remember years ago, I was in the flood of '92 in Montpelier, and I remember seeing these images of people clutching their dogs in these little rafts going down right in front of the Capitol. And at the end, there was a Red Cross tent.
Isn't that a visual?
I know. Handing out blankets, handing out hot coffee, handing out food, because they just need that community and that support right then. That's the most important thing.
And here you are, the executive director now. I mean,
It's an
talk
honor.
about, right.
It's
Well,
such an
I mean,
honor.
you obviously have the passion, unfortunately because of what you've experienced, but also to see all the good that has happened and to be a part of that. Talk about, motivating for other people to get in there and help out in any way that they can.
And I'd like to give a shout out. So our team is mostly volunteer, like I said, 90%, but we have 2 individuals who are disaster program managers, and they oversee the disasters for the entire state of Vermont. So Lindsay Morin and Michaela Olin are just amazing duo. It's
you.
amazing to think that 2 people are overseeing all the disasters in the
That
state.
is for the entire state. It'd be different if it was, maybe a county or something, but the entire state, it's nonstop.
I know. And they're working nonstop.
Right, right. So as far as, kind of going back to the website, when you go to that, is there also a section there as far as volunteering and being able to see all the different possibilities? Like you said, if you wanted to work remotely, you could help out in that regard. So you can go right there and sign up.
You can go right there. You can find out all the volunteer opportunities. You can talk. You can set up a time to talk to your recruiter if you want to have more information. But all the jobs are listed there, and then you can go through a screening process to see what's going to fit, because it has to be a win-win.
Sure, you want it to be something sustained.
Yeah,
yes,
something that you
both.
enjoy, that's comfortable. And the thing I love about volunteering for the Red Cross is the education. So we have an online portal that has all these classes that you can take virtually, or some are in person. It's like the equivalent of a college education. We have one gentleman who wants to work for FEMA in the future, and he's actually getting a lot of his coursework through us as a volunteer.
Oh, I love it.
So it's amazing. So people who just are starting their careers, or maybe want to switch careers, there's so many skills they can learn as a volunteer for free. So it's a great added bonus.
So it would be an example of some of the courses that would be offered.
So some of them are very focused on like Red Cross programs, obviously. It could be on sheltering or whatever. Some of them are just on wellness. Some of them are business focused.
Wonderful.
Whatever you can think
So there's
of.
a wide variety.
Wide variety. Yeah, it's whatever you desire. There's something there. So
Good to know. I had no idea.
You would never run out.
No, and I had no idea that was just another resource available for further
perk.
education.
Yeah, it's an amazing perk of being a volunteer.
Definitely, right. So what would you say in your position, and I'm sure so much of it, as proactive as you want to be, sometimes it just has to be so reactive given, the nature of what you're, up against at times in this, world. As you talk about, flooding was, something. Obviously, we've had our share of floods here in Vermont, but it just seems that back to back these last couple of years, it's frightening because there's so much uncertainty as far as what happens next. And we've had all these torrential downpours, and that wasn't something that we really had to worry about on a regular basis. We've always been pretty insulated in the sense of those major, national disasters like that. We have a big snowstorm, we clean it up, off we go. But this is a whole new animal when you start talking about, the intensity of flooding and what could happen in the future. But what would you say is different now looking forward compared to, and again, you've been there 9 months, but you have so much history too of knowing. So how have things shifted as far as what you're prepared for now, or moving in the direction to be prepared for the future versus in the past?
Well, it used to be the Northeast was kind of safe. Like you said, we'd have snowstorms, but that was kind of it.
Right.
And we were always considered an area where volunteers would leave New England and head out and support other areas.
Exactly, not have to do anything,
now they're
locally.
coming in to support us. It's a huge shift, and we expect that to be the new norm. Climate is getting more intense. We're getting more storms.
True.
We're getting them more often. We're getting 100-year storms every 10 years. So
That's
not really
a
100-year
major
storms
difference,
anymore.
right?
And we're just seeing a lot of changes in our weather patterns. And like right now, this summer, extreme heat. Now, I remember as a child, if you would get 1 or 2 days that were 90 degrees in August, that was
You talk about it for a year.
Yeah. Now we're getting it in June.
The full week of it too, exactly.
It's amazing.
It is.
So now we're dealing with people who are, they're getting dehydrated and they're having heat stroke, which is another risk. So we support cooling shelters to make sure people are safe.
So are there cooling shelters right now throughout Vermont?
There are in certain select cities. Burlington is one that is supporting a cooling shelter. But that's something that we're now seeing. Like in the winter, we have warming shelters. In the summer, we're having cooling shelters. Always was the norm in the South.
Right, but we never
not
had
in the
shelters
North.
before, right?
No, people didn't used to have air conditioning, and now a lot of people have air conditioning, thankfully, but not everybody.
Right.
But I always said I would never have it, and I broke down a few years ago and said, no, I want the air conditioning.
Right.
But we're seeing that change. We're seeing more flooding, not only in Vermont, but all of the East Coast. Maine saw a series of really awful floods around Christmas time that were devastating.
Oh, I remember seeing that, yes.
And then hurricanes. So it's something that we're constantly seeing. So I've been there 9 months, and the team has been in a state of disaster preparedness for almost the entire time, from one flood to another incident to a mass casualty incident. So it's been an interesting new normal that the Red Cross is adjusting to. We're having billion-dollar storms.
Right, and as you said before, we were the state that would sort of head out and
Send out blood,
help.
send out
Exactly.
volunteers.
And now that it's sort of reverse roles, I'm sure those relationships throughout the U.S. are even stronger.
They are.
and a little bit more involved than they used to be, just because unfortunately there's so much more common ground.
Yeah, you know, they love coming up here because they love Vermont.
Right.
I hear that. They like to come up on
That helps.
vacation and
Yes.
not during a
Yes.
disaster.
Yeah.
But definitely we've built great relationships with volunteer partners and volunteers about what we need and how to support. Vermont is unique in that it's a rural state.
Right.
You know, we had flooding in Johnson, we had flooding in Barre and Montpelier and Ludlow. Some of these towns became quite isolated. Roads were washed out. So, you know, it's a struggle to get to certain areas of the state.
Right. I know Green Mountain Power, you know, it was months getting to certain areas to get everything restored. As you say, it's so rural.
Right.
So that's another added dimension, too.
another
It's not
dimension.
like just coming into, not that it's a big city, but coming into Burlington, it's obviously a lot easier to find solutions.
Getting volunteers deployed to that area and being
True.
able to set up shelters and to help people. It's, you know, we're a small state, but we're not that small. It's like 3 hours from north to south, and you know, there's a lot of need. So
Absolutely.
it's amazing what the volunteers are able to do with the support of the staff to support Vermonters. So we're still hearing stories, but it's highly emotional.
Oh, I can imagine. Oh, definitely. But it goes back to, as I said, you know, for the people that I know that work at the American Red Cross and now getting to meet you, I mean, to have that passion and have a position that's so rewarding. I was thankful to have a great career as well, so I can understand how that keeps you going. You know, it's all about just loving what you do and trying to make a difference every day and doing the best you can. And, you know, I certainly am very thankful that we have, you know, so many kind people here in Vermont that do make the community better in the sense of volunteering. And we have more nonprofits per capita than any state in the U.S. So to, you know, rely so heavily on volunteers can be a challenge. But when you say American Red Cross, people understand the need and the urgency and the professionalism and have so much respect for your organization. So in that sense, at least you talk about a great brand that you can feel good about, you know, reaching out to people. And you know, we know this because of the work that we've done over the years, but some people don't know until they do something like that, just how good that makes them feel. I mean, they're serving such a purpose and doing so many great things, but the truth is, really, at the end of the day, it just makes you feel so good. And that's what it's all about. I mean, with Jen, my sister-in-law, her mantra being kind, always being kind, loving, caring, and sharing, that's what it's all about. And once you have that, then things just seem to go as well as they possibly can. You know, when you have support like that emotionally, it can go a long way. Look at you remembering, you know, the American Red Cross showing up at the door at your grandmother's house. I mean, that's talk about etched in your mind forever. So these are, you know, things that obviously change the course of who we are and how we handle things. And what better way than to be involved with an organization? I'm hoping, you know, myself, I'd love to be able to volunteer. And I'm going to go to the website and see what I can do. But certainly to, you know, get the word out there and get more people involved, because overall it just helps us in so many other ways as well. I mean, it's talk about, double, value in the sense of you're helping people and that's great and you're feeling good. It's a win-win all the way around. It's not as though you really look at it as work in that sense. You just feel good to be able to make things better.
Well, we just had a volunteer recognition a few days ago at the St. John's Club, and everybody was sharing their stories. And it was
How beautiful
about, it was
is that?
all about what it meant to them.
That's right. I know.
They said what they receive is so much greater than what they give. And for many of these people, it has been a touchstone of their life. Like, they have been Red Cross volunteers for 30, 40, 50 years.
Right.
Which is just amazing. I can't even fathom that kind of loyalty and dedication to supporting your community. And they do it with such enthusiasm and such passion, and are honored to be able to help people in the community.
That's what it is. I mean, they're so respectful of others that have gone before them and others that are working with them. But a really good friend of mine that I've reconnected with recently is Deb Ignazewski, and her mom and dad were over 30 years as volunteers with the American Red Cross and had the sashes with all the pins. And I gave those actually to Lisa, and they made a nice display over at your office
beautiful.
there.
I've seen it.
And, you know, that was their world. That was their network. And that was, you know, really what made them enjoy this life.
Yeah.
You know, they felt so honored to be part of, you know, such an elite group of people that cared so much for others. And that's what we want. We struggle with, throughout the U.S., but, Burlington, being, a big city or whatever, things are happening that never used to happen, but it's good things like this that's the majority.
Yes.
And that's what we have to do, is just keep moving forward and not really, give as much attention to some of the things that are going wrong as identifying all these really good things. I did a kindness tour a couple of years ago with a great friend, and along the way, I mean, you see these things people are doing. That's what we want to hear about and talk about, because that just makes you feel good, instead of, it's easy to get dragged down with all the negativity. For any one of us, we're human. But, seek out those situations, and boy, your life can all of a sudden have a whole new meaning.
And it's interesting, something as simple as giving blood.
Exactly.
Takes 15
I
minutes.
know, that's the thing. It's not time consuming,
You
but
could save a life.
yes, I mean,
It's
literally,
amazing.
right? You
Literally
make that
save a life.
comment, other people just, life-saving. But I mean, this is true. And as I said, talk about community vitality in the sense of vital.
Yeah.
This is it. So we're going to wrap up here, Sarah. I just can't thank you enough for being here. I hope that we can reconnect again in the future, not over any disaster,
Exactly.
but just to stay in touch as far as, things evolve and things change in every organization. But hopefully through volunteering, I'll get a chance to see you again as well.
That'd be amazing.
Good. Well, thank you again for all the work you do, Sarah. My pleasure to get to meet you
Thank
with you
you.
today. Thank you.